All right. If everybody can start finding their seats, let's go ahead and get started. It's 1:30. And I'm going to get started like this. Mahatma Gandhi, someone that was integral and vital in helping India gain their independence, not only from a violent, not even a violent standpoint, from a non-violent standpoint, getting independence from Great Britain. Something that is so hard to achieve because most times when you declare and get your independence, it's very much so from a violent means, and yet he was able to achieve that from a non-violent one. J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, someone that was able to sell 450 million books, in which that all of you guys know the book, and most of you guys know the movies if you haven't read the books, just like me. Bruce Lee, a martial arts expert, someone that was able to change the stigma and the stereotype on martial arts, so much so that he was able to create a pathway so that Asian actors could become actors. Nelson Mandela, someone that was a part of the anti-apartheid movement, someone that was integral and vital in that movement, so much so that he became the first president of a democratic South Africa. When I think about these people, I don't tend to think about their recognition. I don't tend to think about their awards. I don't think about their speeches or their ceremonies or their galas. Well, maybe I do think about all that. No, I don't tend to think about their fame from an international perspective. What I think about is, what did it take for them to get there? In order for Mahatma Gandhi to help India to gain its independence from a nonviolent means, in order for him to do that, what did it take for him to even get that and to achieve that ends? What did it take for J.K. Rowling to sell 450 million copies? What did it take for Bruce Lee to create a pathway for Asian actors? What did it take for Nelson Mandela to be the first democratic president of South Africa? What did it take in order for them to get there? I want to try something with you guys if it's all right. It's this activity, it's called stand-up activity. And so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say stand up if. And if it applies to you, you're going to stand up. We're going to practice something. Do some practice. So stand up if you like Marvel. Awesome. Everybody can sit down. For those that aren't standing up, I'm sorry. All right, stand up if you like TikTok more than Instagram. Oh, man. I've gotten old. It's okay. All right, last practice one. Stand up if you're glad to be at the World Discipleship Summit. Come on. All right, everybody sit down. All right, let's get real. Let's go right into it. Stand up if you want to see something change in the world. Now look around. Okay, sit down. Stand up if someone's ever cried with you. If someone's ever cried with you. Okay? You can sit down. It's a lot of standing and standing up. Stand up if someone's ever been there for you at one of your lowest moments. Okay? Sit down. And I'm standing up for all these. Stand up if someone's ever sacrificed their time for you. Okay? All right, last one. Everybody sit down. Stand up if someone's ever sacrificed their money and their sleep for you. All right, awesome. Everybody sit down. The reality is this, and this is why I love that practice, that you wouldn't be where you are right now if it wasn't for someone sacrificing something for you. I wouldn't be right here standing right where I am right now if it wasn't for someone sacrificing something for me. When I think about my story of change, I think about where I started. I think about how one of my struggles is I really don't like people. That is one of my struggles. I'm going to be honest with you guys. One of my struggles is I really don't like people. Why? Because when someone says something, it just irritates me. It's just so bothersome, so annoying. I'm like, get away from me. But what I've changed into is this. Someone that completely delights and likes people so much so that rather than being irritated by them, I see their actions as you're a work in progress. Not in the sense of you're a project, but you're someone that is still evolving and changing into Christ. What a radical shift. Or I think about what I still struggle with is the need to be the center of success. Think about when I played high school basketball, one of the games that my team won It's I did terrible, but my team won, and I was so upset. It made no sense, but I went into the locker room, and I was so upset, a sour attitude, and even though my team won by 20 points, I was like, I hate this because I did so poorly. But then, flip it around. I scored like 30 points one game, and my team lost by like 10, and I felt so great, and yet everybody was so upset. How selfish was I? But now to think about where I'm at right now, where I'm able to actually become someone's cheerleader. I hated being a cheerleader. I wasn't that person that was sitting on the sidelines. I was the person that was like, you need to get me into the game. I'm not supporting and cheering for you. I'm the person playing. And yet now I'm able to be a team player. So much so that I'm able to actually get to a place of helping people to do better things than me, to do greater things than me. That didn't just happen. Think of that shift from going from completely selfish to completely selfless. Or thinking about that selfishness as I achieved a new level of selfishness at some point in my life. Even the reason why I wanted to go into the profession that I wanted to go to, I wanted to go into diplomacy and being an ambassador or representative of sort of the United States for another country. And you would think that the reason for me doing that was I wanted to help people. No. I actually wanted to help myself because I wanted to become the youngest ambassador that was ever known in this world so that people could see me. It wasn't really about the money. It wasn't even about helping people out of impoverishment, which is something that I probably should have been thinking about. It was simply, no, I want all the awards, the success, the recognition, the galas, all those things. That's what I want for myself. And now to think about where I'm at, where I've gotten to this mentality where service is not a one-day contract, it's a lifestyle. So much so that now I understand when I'm leading my wife, it's me being leading in a servant type of aspect, where I'm supposed to literally serve her in every need. That is my responsibility, to serve her. I think about that type of change. I think about my story of change. I think about your stories of change as you stood up. And I think about this. What if change required sacrifice? What if change required us sacrificing something? But more than that, what if change required us sacrificing something hard? Would you be willing? But also, think about this. What if doing something hard went hand in hand with making the greatest memory that you've ever been able to experience? I think about my grandparents being married for 60 years and how they talk about their relationship. One, you've been married for 60 years, which meant you went through a lot of stuff. And when they talk about their relationship, they're like, man, it was so hard. We had so many moments where we were like, I don't know if we're going to make it. But yet as they talk about it, they're smiling, they're laughing, and they're talking as if they had the most fun, even though it was something that was one of the hardest things they've ever done in their life. Some of the greatest memories out of something that was so hard. By the end of our time, I want you to come away with answering this one question. This 3-word question: are you willing? Are you willing? If you have a Bible or a phone, just go to John chapter 12. I'm going to read from verse 20 to 28. So John chapter 12, verse 20 to 28. Now there were some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida. I practiced that in Galilee, with a request. Sir, they said, we would like to see Jesus. Philip went to tell Andrew. Andrew and Philip in turn told Jesus. Jesus replied, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No. It was from this very reason, or for this very reason, I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven. I have glorified it and will glorify it again. When I think of Jesus saying, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified, I think about recognition. I think about this woman named Margaret Wells. And Margaret Wells, she was a founder of an organization in Philadelphia called One Day at a Time. And one day at a time, they focused on substance abuse, addiction, homelessness, within really traumatic experiences, really the opioid epidemic there, gun violence, really the whole gambit of things that are happening in Philadelphia. And she was able to do so much in terms of recovery, even to think about that. So she was able to help individuals with recovery, so much so that they no longer had to see themselves as being defined by their drug of choice. But they were able to see themselves as, no, I'm worth it to change. She helped them to be able to recover through their addiction. So much so that in Philadelphia, I don't know if you guys know what National Weed Day is, but it's 4/20. In Philadelphia, they've actually changed National Weed Day to be Margaret Wells Day. She was able, because of what she did, to gain that regional and citywide recognition, so much so that an entire day is named after her. Now I think about Jesus. I think about Jesus' international recognition, so much so that we have holidays based off of what he did, of his resurrection and his death. I think about the recognition that comes from that. And I think that's what we tend to see. I tend to see that recognition of those achievements. And that's something that everybody knows about. But what about those things that happen behind closed doors that no one knows about? What about those things that we don't tend to see? Or those things, again, that no one knows about? I think about Jesus, and I think about Isaiah 53 as I read this. And think about the thing that happened behind closed doors that we don't tend to see when it came to Jesus getting to this status of recognition. Isaiah 53, verse 1 to 12, as you guys listen. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. Think about that. Think about someone thinking of you as nothing in your appearance would be attractive at all. You were completely ugly in every single way. Now I feel some type of way about that. And yet he was okay with that. He was despised and rejected by mankind. Think about someone actually rejecting you in your face and how you feel about that. And yet that's what he went through. He was a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces. Imagine someone seeing you as, you're so familiar with pain that I don't want to be around you, so much so that I want to hide my face from you. I don't even want to be seen with you. He was despised and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him to be punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. Think about that. The punishment that brought us peace. We've created organizations, international organizations, to address peace, like the United Nations. And yet, the very thing that brought us that type of worldly peace, or eternal peace, more so was his punishment. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us have turned to our own way. We turned our backs to him, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Imagine you being oppressed and afflicted. Imagine someone suppressing you so much so that you cannot defend yourself. And yet he could defend himself, and he said nothing. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearer is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, yet who of his generation protested? Imagine someone standing by you and actually protesting with you and how you feel. And now imagine Jesus being in a place where no one in his generation is actually standing by him, protesting for him. No one is standing with him. You know how we have that flag that says stand with Ukraine? Imagine Jesus coming up and saying no one's standing with him. Imagine how that would feel. And yet, he kept going. For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence. Nor was any deceit in his mouth, yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for his sin, he will see his offering and prolong his days. And the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many. He will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give them a portion among the great. And he will divide the spoils with the strong because he poured out his life unto death and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. The reality is this: the part of change that I don't tend to think about that happens behind closed doors, needless to say, and very much so does involve this. It involves despicable humiliation. It involves despicable humiliation. I think about my wife, and I think about when I was in a fraternity in college, and I went to this party. It wasn't a good name, so I'm not going to say the name of the party, but I went to this party, and I was doing everything that I possibly could when it came to just going after just sin. I was treating women as complete trash, and I really didn't care. I was drinking, getting drunk at the party, and just being completely impure in every single way. And so much so, actually, that one of the comments that was made when we were walking or we were doing this dance in the party was this. Someone came up and said, "Don't you realize you guys are gods on campus?" And typically, if I was actually being a disciple or Christian, I'd be like, no, not at all. You know what I did? I was like, yeah, you're right. That's where I was. I thought I was a god on campus. And I remember my wife, she came through the security. She didn't have a ticket to the party. She went through the security on the side and ran into the party. Everything was pitch black, and this woman just around just trying to find her best friend. She was trying to find me. And I never saw her because I left the party a little bit early, but I found out what she did, and I thought of her as, you must be so embarrassed. You humiliated yourself in front of everybody. How could you do that? And when I think about what she did, I think about this question of, again, are you willing? Are you willing to be seen as someone that is embarrassing and humiliating himself when it comes to someone changing? Are you willing to be seen as someone that's embarrassing or humiliating themselves? My wife is actually going to talk about this point a little bit more.
Hi, everybody. So, my name is Laura. I don't think we introduced ourselves at the very beginning. But yeah, that story, every time Jamison talks about it, I get just excited at the fact that, yeah, I was willing to embarrass myself for my best friend at the end of the day, because he was someone who reached out to me when I was in college, and my whole life changed because of God and the Word and community and just seeing like God's love for me. So to go into a party where I was like, I knew I wasn't even supposed to be or didn't want to be, I was willing to go there because I was like, my best friend's in there and he's not supposed to be in there. I need to get him out. And that's a story for another day. But I really wanted to share, when it comes to thinking about, the humiliation Jesus went through, I also think about the vulnerability he was under. Like, he was so vulnerable in this state when he was on earth. I mean, he had everything, yet gave it up to be like us. And I think that's extremely vulnerable, because when you're vulnerable like that, you open yourself up to attack. So if you're like trying to, start something at your schools or make a change in your communities, you're opening yourself up to some rejection. You're opening yourself up to possibly failing and a lot of discouragement. But I'm going to tell you a story about how when I was around 16 years old, that was the last thing on my mind, was how I was going to fail or how I was going to be rejected by people. All I knew as a teen was that I wanted to make a difference. And I was willing to go the path of vulnerability because, hey, like, I saw that there was a need to change something in this world, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so in high school, how many people in here are in high school? Okay, so we got some high schoolers. And I mean, a lot of like my my desire to see a difference in this world didn't start when I was in high school. It started way younger. Like I was a part of a knitting club and was like selling bags when I was like 10. And then before that, I was like, okay, Mom, like I want to be the next Oprah. So I ran for school class president, and then I lost, and I was so sad about it. Still kind of sad about it. But in high school, I went to a school that lacked a lot of diversity. I was rarely someone in my class who would look around and see anyone who looked like me. And I was accustomed to that. That wasn't weird for me. But I had 3 older brothers, and so they raised me by the television. So whenever they were babysitting me, they would literally just put on the TV, and I'd just sit there and watch. And it wasn't always great things. But I stumbled across a show in high school called If You Really Knew Me. And the show would really talk about these high schools that were like experiencing extreme like just tension and division. And these high schools were like notoriously known across like the United States for just being like places you don't want to go to school. Bullying, high suicide rates, a lot of depression. You know, you didn't have any kind of connection with your administration. And I didn't necessarily feel like I went to a high school like that, but I saw that there was issues in my high school. And I, you know, following Oprah's lead, wanted to put myself in positions of change. And so I served on a student council in my high school, and my principal was like, what do you guys think our school needs right now? And I was like, we need If You Really Knew Me to come to our school. And they need to do this thing called Challenge Day. And she was like, sounds interesting. But I was like, I know we can do it. And I gave her my pitch, and so we raised $6,000, flew this crew out over to my high school, and we had Challenge Day. And at that time, I just knew I wanted to see something powerful happen at my school, but I had no clue what was coming our way. And in Challenge Day, there was a line in the room, and we all stood on one side. And they'd ask us a question, and you'd walk to the line if it applied, kind of like the stand-up thing that we did. But, I mean, we really got to know each other. And from that day, you know, our school really came together. And, I mean, so much change. Like, we were, like, one of the most united classes across our county, and it was really cool. But I had to make a decision. Okay, I'm going to vulnerably talk about this with my school, and if they say no, I'm still going to make a difference. And I made a decision along with a whole bunch of other people, about 300 people in the room, that we were going to change the world. But we had to write up on a board how. And so I had written down, I want to bring on the change in my community. So I called up my best friend, Kayla, and I was like, we have to do something. And we're 16, so I'm like, what? I don't really have money. I don't really know what to do right now, but I've got time. And so this idea of bring on the change came up, and we started this project where we were gonna go out there and we were gonna meet a whole bunch of artists, like music artists, and we were gonna ask them how they were bringing on the change in their community. Because as we know that they're talented, but we wanted to know, are you making a difference? And so we set out. I ended up interviewing Mindless Behavior, Kendrick Lamar, Jacob Lattimore, and all these cool people just because we had a vision that we were going to make a difference. And the thing was I didn't care how old I was because Oprah said I could do it. That was my thought process at the time. We didn't care what we looked like. We didn't care about the rejection. We asked so many music managers, can we interview their artists? And they're just looking at us like, what? But we had a pitch and we stuck by it. It took courage to believe in something other people around us honestly doubted us in. And honestly, I think about it now, but my parents were the main culprits of who did not believe that we could do this. But I think it was out of their genuine fear of like these 16-year-old girls like just going around and interviewing these like artists, but also their concern but what about your future, like your education? And we've sacrificed so much for you guys to do what you're doing now that you could lose it if you go down the wrong path. But honestly, because I opened myself up to the vulnerability, I started to allow the sounds and like the messages of you can't do this, you're too young, to start to get to me. But again, my friend and I were determined to bring on the change. So I told her, I know that the only way we can bring this change on is through Jesus. And I went to church, and I was faithful that, Jesus could do anything. So I would start my prayers like, what's up, Jesus? So, yeah, I want to make a change today, and we're about to go meet Kendrick Lamar. Can you please let us happen? Like, can you please let this happen? And that's how I would pray, just youthful, childlike, like, I know you can make it happen. And then he did, and it was inspiring for my faith. But again, the vulnerability was scary. And out of just like all the things that were coming my way, I believed those lies after some time that I could not do it. And so we ended up just abandoning our dream for a moment, and we went back to our ordinary lives. And I'm going to pass it back to Jamison.
You guys know who mindless behavior is? No, you don't. It's fine. But when I sort of reminisce and reflect over my wife coming into that party, I honestly think of that as one of the greatest memories that I have. It's one of the memories that I really lean on, and I say, this is the memory that really has defined our best friendship. You know, people that you would say are your best friend because you've went through a lot. Well, those are one of those times we went through a lot, and it really defines us being best friends. And it's so interesting that was through doing something that was hard for her. And yet, I see that as one of the greatest memories that I'll ever be given. Are you willing to do something hard? When I think of Jesus saying, very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. I think about my mom. I think about my mom specifically helping me out with hockey. Now, I'm going to say this. Yes, I understand. I am black, and yes, I played hockey. I know you all think it. Maybe you're not. I'm playing. It's okay. You're supposed to laugh more, but it's okay. Anyway, but I played hockey in Texas. Yes, Texas does have hockey. I understand. It is a very hot state. It is the most southern state in the U.S. I understand that, but Texas does have hockey. Anyway, just wanted to put those things out there. But I do think about the sacrifice that my mom made in those times. I think about how much she sacrificed time. So she was a teacher, which meant that you're on a specific schedule in terms of just when you get off work and when you go to sleep. And so when she got off work, it was around 4 p.m. And so the drive over to get to my school was about 30 minutes. So now we're at 4:30. And then we have to drive all the way to Austin, Texas, which was about an hour, 30 minutes away. So now you're at 6 o'clock. Now the practice starts at around 7. So we're waiting for an hour. Then we start practice at 7. The practice lasts about 2 hours. So I'm practicing all the way to 9 o'clock. And she's still there waiting for me in this cold ice rink. This cold. Have you ever sat through a hockey game? It's not great, especially if you don't have a coat. You're in Texas, so you're not going to have a coat. And yet she sat those 2 hours. Now it's 9 p.m. Now we have to go change. And you know, when you're in a lot of hockey gear, it takes a while to change. So it took us 30 minutes to change. Now we're at 9:30, and we still have to drive back home an hour and 30 minutes. So we get back at 11 o'clock, and now I still haven't eaten yet. And you know how selfish I was. I wasn't going to try to cook for myself. So you know the first question was, Mom, what are we eating for dinner? And it's 11 p.m. at night. And so she graciously makes me dinner, and now it's 11:30. I haven't taken a shower yet because I stink. So now it's 12, and she's making sure I take a shower because I'm 12 years old. And now it's midnight. And then, I didn't tell you this. She has to get up at 5 a.m. for work. And that was 3 days a week. So when I talk about sacrifice time, that's what I mean. She sacrificed so much time for me just so I could do something that I love to do. What did that teach me? That taught me this. That taught me how much she cared about me. How much time she gave to me taught how much she cared about me. How much time she sacrificed to me taught me how much she cared about me. I think about how much sleep she sacrificed. Think about, again, you're on a teacher's schedule. 3 days a week, you're going to bed at midnight, have to wake up at 5 a.m., and then you have to figure out a way to prepare stuff before you go and prepare stuff for your family, i.e. food, before you go in. And then it's like a 15-minute drive just to get to the school. 3 days a week, sacrifice sleep. You're not sleeping for those 3 days. And then, I forgot to mention, you have to take care of first graders. First graders. First graders. On 5 hours of sleep. So sacrificing sleep simply so I could do something that I love to do. What did that teach me? Well, that taught me not only how much he cared about, but it taught me a valuable lesson of how I could be there for other people. How once I went into high school, when someone hit me up at 3 a.m. trying to have an early morning conversation because they were in dire need, I was able to think back to how my mom was there for me and sacrificed for me. And so what could I do for them? I could sacrifice for them. Or when I went to college and someone would have had a late night conversation all the way through the night because they were suffering or they were going through some type of suicidal ideation. And I was able simply just to be there for them for this idea of the power of with. How was I able to do that? Not because of my own strength, but simply because that was the example that someone set for me first. Through my mom. The sacrifice of time and sleep. In Philadelphia, we have this thing. In the campus ministry, we have this phrase that we came up with. It's called inconveniencing yourself when it's convenient for other people. Inconveniencing yourself when it's convenient for other people. And I share that with this example of, more specifically, gun violence in Philadelphia. Gun violence is something that's huge in Philadelphia, specifically within the youth. So much so that we have this app. It's called the Citizens app. If you don't know it, when you get to Philadelphia, you'll know it. And let me tell you how bad it is. And this is not sugarcoating it. This is not something that's a fantasization or romanticization. This is actually realistic, in which that people are dying every week. Every week, someone is dying, specifically actually by Temple University, where we sort of live. So think about gun violence, and you ask people, so how can you counter gun violence in Philadelphia? Well, then some of the adults, some of the parents will say, we have to give these kids just something to do. And then the next question is, will you be willing to give them something to do? And the answer is this: no, we're too busy. Weren't you the one that was saying that this was a huge issue? And now I ask if you want to be a part of the solution, and you say you're too busy. And then everybody accuses the kids, and it's the kids' fault when no adult is willing to do something about it. You have to be kidding me. This is why I'm grateful for an organization called Hope for Kids. This is specifically why I'm grateful, because they understand the power of mentorship. So much so that they get teenagers, they get campus students, they get adults to be with these kids, to simply just be in their lives, to give them a positive role model. No matter what, and here's something that you have to understand. No matter how you feel, you are a role model. It's just whether you're a positive or negative one. And you have to figure that out. But to give them positive role modelship, to be there with them for literally through it all. In their best moments, in their worst moments, simply just to be there for them, to provide mentorship for them. To provide someone that actually cares. To give them a pathway for them to understand that they don't have to be defined by their environment or their circumstances. This is why I'm grateful for one of the programs called Camp Miracles, because that's what it does. It's hard, it's gruesome, it's tiring. You sacrifice time, you sacrifice sleep, just like my mom. But on the end of it, you form the greatest memories. Are you willing to sacrifice yourself for the sake of change? Are you willing to sacrifice your time? Are you willing to sacrifice your sleep? When I think about my mom's sacrifice, it's one of my greatest memories. And it wasn't even my sacrifice, it was hers. So her sacrifice gave me one of my greatest memories. That means that our sacrifice gives other people their greatest memories, if only we would decide to answer that one question of, are we willing to do something hard? When I think of Jesus saying, but if it dies, it produces many seeds, I think about my dad. I think about my dad specifically in running. So from a very young age, probably around 5 years old, I was running the 1,500 and the 2 mile, going to Junior Olympics, running times like a 4:20 in a mile. That were the times that we were running. But what did it take? It took this. It took my dad waking me up at 6 a.m., very reluctantly, I might add, not from his part, but from my part, because I'm a kid. I don't want to wake up at 6 a.m. I want to sleep. I just want to sleep. And so my dad, because he knew that it was something I was good at, would wake me up at 6 a.m. And mind you, this is how the wake-up process would go. Wake up. All right, I'm going to wake up. Wake up. All right, I'm going to wake up. Wake up. Come back 5 minutes. All right, I'm going to wake up. Pour water on you. All right, I'm going to wake up. He only poured water on me one time. But all that just to get me up to do something that I wanted to do. And mind you, he did that for 8 years. 8 straight years of waking me up every day in the summer just to run at 6 a.m., so much so that I could potentially get a scholarship somewhere. But more than that, just do something that he knew I was good at and I was good at. I think about sacrificing yourself for one day. And it's one thing to do that. It's another thing to do it for 8 years. It's one thing to sacrifice yourself. It's another thing to be a living sacrifice. Now, when I take a second and third look at this scripture, because I'm supposed to be reading more and more, but if it dies, it produces many seeds. These are the two thoughts that come up. The first thought is this. This doesn't make any sense. When I think about this statement being an absolute and definitive, but if it dies, it produces many seeds, let's think about that for a second. If a seed is buried, not all seeds end up becoming plants. That's just a fact. And yet, when I look at this, but if it dies, it produces many seeds, it's acting as if it's an absolute. Logically, that doesn't make any sense. But now let me step into the arena of change. When I think about how there are so many people that have been going after and sacrificing themselves for change. Let's talk about gun violence. You know how long we've been fighting for gun violence? Not only in the state of Philadelphia, but just simply in the U.S., from a U.S. context. And let me not just step into the world context, but from a U.S. context, we've been fighting gun violence for so long. Personally, I've been affected by it so much so that my best friend got shot on his 18th birthday, and people were fighting for this for their entire life. So don't tell me that this is an absolute. Don't tell me that this is definitive, because my best friend died because of this. How are you able to say this with such a definitive manner? But then I think about this. I want you to listen to this. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. Now bear with me. I want you to think about this part. If I'm sacrificing for a social cause like gun violence, who am I serving? Or what am I serving? I'm serving that social cause. Can that social cause promise me anything? No. Now, if I'm sacrificing myself for God, who am I serving? I'm serving God. So, can God promise me anything? Yes, but that's something that I came to believe. And that's something that you have to test out to figure out if that's true for you. I can't tell you that's something that's true. You have to figure that out for yourself. But if it is true, that means that God can come through for me, which means that now I can step into this next question. One of the hardest questions that I've ever had to ask myself. Are you willing to allow God to be in control of what needs to change? Are you willing to allow God to be in control of what needs to change? I say this is one of the hardest things because of my experience, but when I think about Jesus and I think about Mark 1, how Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist, how he was arrested unjustly, I might add. And not only that, if you didn't know that King Herod was someone of not only a Jewish but a Roman descent, you would think that it was racially charged. So now you're stepping into a racial injustice. And then on top of that, later on in Matthew 14, you find out that John the Baptist was beheaded. Yet another injustice. So not only arrested unjustly, but also beheaded unjustly. So now you have social injustice, and now you have racial injustice. And now, when you realize that this is your family, this is your close cousin, well, then now it makes it all worse. Because we're blood. You killed my family. You killed my blood. What do I want to do? I want to retaliate. So now let's step into Jesus' mentality. All those emotions going through his mind, and he could say anything as he starts his ministry in Mark 1. He could talk about racial stuff. He could talk about social stuff. He could talk about injustice. He could talk about killing. He could talk about humanitarian crimes. He could talk about all these things, and yet, he says this: repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. Why doesn't he talk about all these other things? Well, because if you have the heart of change, then all those other things are taken care of. Imagine if someone had the heart of change when it came to gun violence. Well, then I wouldn't even have to deal with the gun violence because all I want to do is change. So how can I change? How can I help? When we talk about racial issues, how can I change? How can I help? What can I do to be better? When you talk about the heart, which is change, it creates a resolution for all else. And yet I had to take a step back with that question of, am I willing to be on board with what God wants to change? Some of the hardest things, one of the hardest things. But say you're not willing, which is just where you're at. Even if you're not willing, and you're able to experience change to this degree, the reality is this: no matter if you're willing or not, God let the change happen. Because there's so many things when it comes to change that should not change and should not work. There's so many factors, external and internal, that are at play that shouldn't work. And yet, if God allows it, it's simply because it's a gift. So no matter what, when it comes to results, all results are gifts. All results of change are gifts, which is something huge to understand. But here's the second thing that I think about. I think about this: I can't do this. You're talking about me sacrificing to a place of being willing to be seen as someone that's humiliating and embarrassing themselves. You're talking about sacrificing my time, something that is so precious, I might add. You're talking about sacrificing my sleep, not only for a day, but what if someone doesn't change for 8 years? You're talking about sacrificing myself, my time, and my sleep for 8 years? Are you kidding me? How in the world am I going to be able to do that? And with the right attitude? This is impossible. But what if I could ask, what can make it possible? What actually makes this possible? Rather than this feeling of being impossible, or this feeling of, if I go after this, I will feel like a failure because I will not accomplish what I set out to accomplish. It's interesting. What makes this possible? My wife's going to talk about this point.
So, at the beginning, I shared that story about what I did in high school. And the reason why is because I had faith in God. Like, no one could shake that for me. I'd seen God do too many things in my family. My brother was diagnosed with cancer at 13, and we prayed and fasted, and I had seen God work in our family in ways that even to this day, I just stand in awe. And I was only 5 when this was happening. And so growing up, I was like, I know I love this God. I'm just not really, I don't know much else about him besides the fact that I love him. So all the things that I was able to see God do in my life in middle school and high school was because I truly had faith in him, but I was not faithful to him. And I think a question that I had to ask myself was, am I willing to go from not only having faith in God to actually being faithful towards him? And I had prayed specifically in high school when we were doing all of our, I felt like we were on tour, like little celebrities, like going to these concerts and getting backstage. And it was a really cool experience. But I had prayed specifically that the moment our mission didn't align with him, I wanted him to take it away from us. Because I had believed from the beginning that we could do it. Like, nothing was impossible with God. I had seen it in the scriptures. I had read about all these amazing people like Mary. And these were people who were young. They were like Mary was a teenager. I mean, there was people like Timothy. He was in his 20-somethings, leading a church. And then you had like people like David and Daniel. And I'm just like, wow, these are some young people. And I want to be like them. But again, I only had faith in God. And that's powerful. That is powerful. And if you have faith in God and you're in this room, that is powerful. That's powerful enough for you to start a cool Bible talk or share with your friends or talk to your families about God. But don't let it just stop with having faith in him. Allow it to take you to a place of making a decision to be faithful to him and how you lived. And again, I had prayed that prayer, and he did take it away. And I mean, my friend and I had started making decisions. Honestly, I was kind of the leader of the pack, like making really bad decisions, because we were reaching heights of our dreams, but I also was starting to serve the world more than I was serving God. And what started to feel possible with God started to feel really impossible because of my choices and decisions. And I started to give up on the fact that we could bring on a change, because all of a sudden, everything started to become centered around us. And then in the midst of us doing something that felt revolutionary for our age, there were lies planted, and I started to believe them, that I could accomplish all of this on my own. Suddenly, those prayers before getting to meet these different artists started to slowly go in the background, and I'd go to these things feeling like, all right, guys, let's do this. We've got this. Like, it became about what we could do, not what God was doing through us. And see, I'm so glad that God was in control of the many doors that were opened and closed during this time, because, again, it taught me that it wasn't that I couldn't do it. It's not the fact that you can't do something, but it's the fact that after a while you have to decide, am I going to make this about myself or about something bigger than me? And for me, it took many years after, that high school, revolutionary time in my life to then being kind of knocked down because of sin and Satan's lies, that then in college I was reached out to by Jamison and renewed this reminder in me that it wasn't about me from the beginning. And the change that needed to start wasn't in the artists that I was actually interviewing. The change that needed to start in my community actually started in me. But I realized that it wasn't going to take all the work that I was doing. God had already done all the work. He had come, and he had been despised, and he had been humiliated for my sake because he loved me. And see, I had to go from this stance of being like, God, I have faith in you, to I'm going to be a faithful follower of you. I just need you to teach me what that looks like, because I really had no idea. So if you're in this room and you're like, man, I want to make a difference, and I'm here because I believe that I can make a change and that God can make a change, don't just stop there. Ask yourself, what is it going to look like for me to become faithful to God and follow him as I go about bringing on the change?
So the thing that makes it possible for me is 2 Timothy 1, verse 7. For the Spirit of God does not make us timid, but keeps us, or gives us power, love, and self-discipline. So I think about this Holy Spirit power. This power was the very power that put Jesus into the womb of Mary, the very power that resurrected Jesus. And so that's the very power that helps us to be able to be loving and to have self-discipline. And so when I think about this sacrifice, I think about God not only helping us in the result, being a gift, but also helping us in the process. So much so that he helps us in everything that we're doing, like my wife was even talking about, where God was out of the picture. Now you put God in the picture. And so God's helping in everything, not only the result, not only the ends, but also the means. And it's only simply us that needs to decide this. Our responsibility is simply that three-word question of, are we willing? Yeah. Are you willing? And when we are, we get to experience the fruit of his promises. I think one of the fruits of his promises are Galatians 5, the fruits of his Spirit. I think about love. I think about during COVID-19, it was super hard for me to love people where they were at. Everybody had a lot going on. When I say everybody, I mean everybody. Well, it felt like everybody. A lot of conversations, a lot of people that were feeling a lot of people that were feeling hurt because someone else was hurt. A lot of people that were dealing with a lot of problems. And it was for me to take the time to understand what it looked like to listen, and to listen to understand, rather than listen to respond. To listen, to simply love. Listen, to understand, to validate. LUV. So much so that because of that, one of the people that went through that now sees that time as one of her greatest memories. One of her greatest memories. And when she told me that, I was like, really? Man, we went through a lot. She was like, yeah, that's one of my greatest memories. So much so that now she's on one of the programs called Chance of a Lifetime, what she's going after, where she's going for 13 to 15 months, just a way just to learn how to help people to change in ministry. Just to be able to see how that was a part of one of her greatest memories, her greatest moments. I also think about another part of the fruit of his promises, people becoming imitators. Think as I've changed, I see other people imitating me. And I think about, again, the reason why I'm here, the reason why I'm standing here is simply because someone else sacrificed for me. And so that allowed me to sacrifice, and that allows other people to sacrifice. And now you start having this generational DNA of change. Generational DNA of change, so much so that you're starting to bring change into the world. It's not this idea we're changing the world, it's the idea of bringing change into the world. It's something that's completely different. If Jesus wanted to change the world, he would have already did it when he was here. What he did was he brought change into the world. One person at a time. When we do this, if we are willing and when we are willing, we get to bring change into the world. As all of you stood up and said, I want to see something change in this world. Well, again, it starts with you deciding to be willing to do something hard. As you do that, you bring change into the world, and someone else brings change into the world, and then someone else brings change. So where do we start? Where do we start? And my wife's going to share some practicals on this.
Where do we start? I think one of the first places you have to start or want to start is believe that you can be a part of that change. The change that's already started because of what God's done, you have to decide, do I believe that I can be a part of the change? You have to also believe that this is not a mission for someone else to go out there and be a part of, but that you are going to be a part of the mission. Humanity needs God's love, y'all. And you have to decide, am I going to be a part of fulfilling God's plan to love this world beyond what we can even imagine? Second thing, you don't try to do this alone. Don't try to be a part of the change by yourself. Sure, you have to make a decision, but you also have to bring some people with you. Find out who's also going out there with that same heart to see this world be different. Not just because we want it to be different, because God truly believes in his creation. He believes that he can work through us to make this world everything that he died for. But don't do it alone, because accountability is so important. Jamison calls me higher. He's always like saying, hey, like let's go and start a new campus club at another school. And I'm like, but we've already started like 5. I'm kind of scared. I'm tired. I don't know how to take care of these people myself. And he's like, no, but we can do this. Like, we just need to go find more people to join the cause. I'm like, okay. But find those people who are going to keep putting those dreams in your heart so that you're not doing this alone and they're not doing it alone. Third thing, things cannot change by remaining the same. Things cannot change by remaining the same. In order to make a difference, something has to change. And so that means that as you become a part of making a difference, you will not stay the same. If you desire for this world to change, you are going to have to embrace the fact that you will not remain the same. And praise God for that, because the change that we will see comes from a source that is good. So change in Christ is good. And I've had to embrace the renewed mind, recognize that I need a Savior to help me get through all of this, but that I won't be the same person, and I'm so grateful for that. Because the 17-year-old me that I knew who was making a difference was awesome, but the 28-year-old woman that I am now who's making a difference is even better because my identity's in Christ. And so the last thing is you cannot allow anyone to look down on you because you're young. And so I want you to close your eyes for a second and just listen to God's words to Timothy. In 1 Timothy 4, he says, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." Open your eyes. Y'all, do not let anyone look down on you because you are young. But don't forget to think about how you're living your life. Think about the purity that God's called us to. Learn what it looks like to have faith in him. And cover all of these things with love, because God believes in you. So who am I to say you can't do it? If God believes in you, like, man, the man's powerful. Like, I can't tell you can't do it, and neither can you. You can't look at yourself in the mirror and say, I can't do this. You've got a God out there who knows that you can do it. And so those are my practicals I want to leave you with.
Awesome. Let's close out with this. I want to end with this thought. I have a lot of thoughts, apparently, just realizing this. But what if we forgot? What if we forgot all that it took for us to get to where we are right now? What if we forgot all the sacrifice, all the embarrassment, all the humiliation, all the sacrificial time, the sacrificial sleep? What if we simply forgot, so much so that we just weren't willing? We weren't willing to do those very things because we forgot about them. Well, I'm reminded of this quote: "The only thing in the universe that remains the same is change." And so if that is true, there is no neutral ground. You're either progressing or regressing. The world is either progressing or regressing. So if we're not sacrificing so much so because we forgot, that means the world is going to regress when it comes to change. But what if we remember? What if we remember all that it took to get us to where we are right now? What if we remembered all the sacrifice, all the humiliation, all that same embarrassment, all the time, all the sleep, all the being a living sacrifice? What if we remembered what it took for us to be at a place to do something hard? So much so that we were willing to do something hard. What if we remembered so much so that we became that seed that wasn't falling on the ground, that wasn't buried, but we became the seed that came from the tree that was falling on the ground and was buried, that produced more fruit? Think about the memories. Think about the memories so much so that you come away with this quote of, "We were a part of this." Think about you talking about God in front of most of the school in your cafeteria and talking to your friends and saying, "Yo, remember, we were a part of this." Think about serving by picking up trash in the community you live in when no one else wanted to because they weren't about that life. They weren't about service. They weren't about being service as a lifestyle. And they made fun of you. They mocked you so much so that you look back on that and you say, "Yo, we were a part of this." Remember, or think about when you did caring about people when no one else seemed to care, so much so that it was so hard and people made fun of you, but you look back at it and you say, "Yo, we were a part of this." Think about you not giving up doing what is right because everyone else gave up. Think about everyone else leaving, your friends, your colleagues. They left. They didn't want this lifestyle. They gave up because they wanted to stop doing what was right. But you were able to say, "We were a part of this. We were a part of this. We were a part of this." But it starts with this 3-word question. Are you willing? Amen, guys.
We kind of used up all of our time, sorry. But do you guys have any questions or just any thoughts? And we can also, hi Bradley, our cousin's here. Hello. And our friend Bryce, hi. But does anyone have any questions or just thought? Anything to share? And that's also okay if you don't. Cool. So we'll be here for a little bit if you have any thoughts or just want to come up, talk a little bit about maybe what you're trying to do to bring on the change where you're at. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. But thank you guys so much for coming out.